Then I went again.
Well, he said
spiritual dimension.
How precious and how
important in the world.
you have a family.
Everyone else was astonished.
Mr. Nash Kestenbaum was president of the National Council of Young Israel in 1973 at the outbreak of the Yom Kippur War. Mr. David Kestenbaum, his son, recalls his father's efforts on behalf of Israel at the time.
Policemen came to our shul, asked to speak to the Rav. I think that was Rebbe Rotman, who was the Rav of Young Israel of Long Beach. My father's Shliach Tzibur, and said a war broke out in Eretz Yisrael, and that he has to go to Washington. He stopped davening for the Amud, and he went in the car and brought him to the hospital of Long Beach. I think it was called Long Beach Memorial Hospital at the time. And there was a helicopter waiting on the roof, which took him to Kennedy, and a plane took him to Washington. And they met with 17 generals, the chief of staff, and Nixon throughout the day. They were in contact with Golda Meir, and whoever was necessary in Eretz Yisrael throughout the day. And they arranged the airlift of all the weapons for Eretz Yisrael was arranged on that day. And after Yom Kippur was over, so he felt he should call the people that that should be called. So the first person that he called was Menachem Begin, who I think was the head of the opposition. And then he called Rav Moshe Feinstein, and then he called Lubavitch Rebbe. And he told them how badly the first day of the war went, and they were in sakana of losing the war, and that they arranged for the airlift, and one of the big things was that they were going to send entire back of planes because it seems that the Russian missiles would blow up behind the plane. Because the hottest spot, they were heat-seeking missiles, the hottest spot was a little bit behind the plane, and so they were blowing up behind the plane, and the planes were just having their backs damaged, so they sent entire backs of planes. So he called the Rebbe, and he told him, what the situation was, and that the airlift had already started, and that they had met all day with the 17 generals and the heads of staff and Nixon, and the airlift had already begun as they were speaking. But the situation was dire. So the Rebbe said to him that, don't worry, everything is going to be fine. They're going to march on to Damascus. So my father told him, this is, not so logical because they really suffered terrible casualties the first day, and they're in sakana of the country being run over. And the Rebbe said, don't worry about it. They're not going to be run over. They're going to be so successful, they're going to march on to Damascus. So in the end, well, first of all, my father took that as a haftacha was going to happen, and he was so thrilled that, when a gadol said it to him, he considered that was what's going to happen. He was mamash a mammon in that way. And so he was so relieved when he heard that they were going to win, they're going to march on to Damascus. When the war was over, so my father teased the Rebbe a little bit, and he said, no, what happened? They stopped 40 kilometers away from Damascus. They didn't march on to Damascus. So the Rebbe got so upset, he said, is it my fault that Henry Kissinger intervened and stopped it? Is it my fault that Henry Kissinger stopped them from going? It had not been for him, they would have been able to march on to Damascus. Can you imagine, if they had taken Damascus, the trump card that they would have had for negotiations, he says there would have been peace forever. He says that they got in Damascus, they would have had peace forever. He says it was a terrible thing, a terrible avla that they didn't get Damascus.